Shocking overnight, federal police fired tear gas at protesters in Portland, Oregon, as some of them began disassembling a fence around the federal courthouse. This was the scene overnight. This morning, there are growing questions about camouflaged federal officers who have arrested protesters and put them, in some cases, into unmarked cars. Portland's mayor says these federal agents are escalating the situation. Joining me now is Ken Cuccinelli. He's the acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. Ken, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much for being with us. Overnight,
good morning.
You told the Washington Post, quote, the agency, the Department of Homeland Security, will maintain a heavy presence in Portland and send reinforcements to other cities if violence surges. What does this mean exactly in terms of other cities, and what can we expect in terms of a federal law enforcement national deployment?
So the violence in Portland was going on for 4, 5, 6 weeks before we got intelligence about planned attacks on federal facilities, where we backed up the Federal Protective Service, which is responsible for protecting the courthouse there and other federal buildings, with other DHS law enforcement components. And we've been there ever since, wearing, by the way, the very same uniforms every day, and the crowd has seen them every day, marked and so forth. But if we get the same kind of intelligence in other places about threats to other federal facilities or officers, we would respond the same way. And we have a responsibility. The Department of Homeland Security is charged with protecting these facilities. And when they're unusually threatened, we advance extra resources. So it's really as simple as that. And as we've seen all around the country, where there's solid cooperation, which is a question in Portland because of how the civil authorities there want to run things, we see more peace advanced as responsible policing advances as well.
Let's break that down in two parts. The mayor of Portland actually says, you said the federal officers went in there after several weeks of violence. The mayor there says the violence was actually improving and on the verge of being almost completely better, but the federal law enforcement deployment made it worse. Your response?
No, look, he has to say something. He's kowtowing to a local political base. And if you look at the day by day, literally every single day since late May, they've had violence in Portland. The idea that our advancing other agents in the July 4th weekend somehow escalated violence is just, it's literally just a talking point.
Well, we are hearing that, by the way. We are hearing that.
And by the way, well, wait a minute.
We're hearing that from locals as well. We're hearing that from local press as well. We're hearing that from local press as well.
The intelligence we had was correct that weekend.
You said specifically that these federal agents are acting when unusually threatened. Those were the exact words you just said to me. I want to put Chris David, video of 53-year-old Chris David, a Navy veteran, up on the screen. I don't know if you can see this, but this happened over the weekend.
Yeah, I cannot.
Chris David is a 53-year-old Navy veteran. You can see him. He's the large man there. Our audience can see him. You can't. But he's standing still, and he's being hit repeatedly with batons there. Is that what you mean when you say the federal officers are being unusually threatened?
What you have there is Marshal Service folks. You don't have DHS officers. I'm familiar with the video you're talking about. All I have is the video that I've seen. I haven't seen either the audio or the reports of officers of what was going on. But
based on what you see,
based on what you see in that video,
just based on what you see, is that unusually threatening?
No, I don't base things on one. The reason we came there wasn't because of some future video. The reason we advanced other DHS law enforcement officers is because there was intelligence locally generated that there were going to be threats to federal facilities. Maintaining an appropriate response is an ongoing obligation. I grant you that, and that's for all of us. But at the same time, the threat to those federal facilities and officers did materialize in the July 4th weekend and has maintained since that time. And as long as it does, we will maintain our presence. When that violence recedes and those threats recede, that is when we would ratchet back down to what I would call normal presence, defending and protecting federal facilities that is regularly present in Portland and has been at that courthouse, for instance, since 1997.
The question is about the appropriateness and the proportionality of the response, and also the people carrying it out. You say they are CBP, Customs and Border Protection agents assigned to the Federal Protective Services. They are in camouflage. They have patches on. Based on my study of the video, it's hard to see. It's hard to make out the patches to find out where they're from. But I'm going to read to you from a Homeland Security internal memo obtained by the New York Times on the training of these officers. It says, quote, "The highly skilled tactical teams assigned to support the civil unrest and riots do not specifically have training in riot control or mass demonstrations. Moving forward, if this type of response is going to be the norm, specialized training and standardized equipment should be deployed to responding agencies." Your response to that?
Yeah, that is not correct. And I mean, you see CBP, if you remember in the last year or two, rushes at the border, where you saw crowd control CBP officers, really OFO officers, deployed. It's the same training, and the people there in Portland have that training from CBP. We have other officers there doing
Why was
questioning,
this
for instance,
DHS
their
memo written? I didn't
investigators.
write this memo. This is your own department
Well,
that wrote this memo.
Neither did I. Neither did I. Neither did I. It's a big department, 240,000 people, and that is not correct. And FPS, in addition, because all of these agents from outside the Federal Protective Service are there to support FPS in its mission, they have not only been cross-designated, they got additional training from FPS related to their authorities with respect to protecting the facilities. So not only do they have the base training, they also have the training necessary, which is largely legal training, which all officers get, to understand the jurisdictional boundaries under which they're operating as people in support of FPS.
One of the videos that has caused concern, and Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon disseminated this as well, was of a man being put in an unmarked van on the streets. I wonder if we can show this video so people can see. These are the CBP agents that you were talking about approaching the man, taking him, and then putting him in an unmarked van here.
Right.
Now, locals there were asking for the officers to identify themselves. There are people who have described this is not me, as Orwellian, being put into an unmarked vehicle, being driven away by officers who don't identify themselves. What's your view of this action?
So first of all, unmarked police vehicles are so common it's barely worth discussion. I mean, literally every police department in America has them and uses them. We are no exception. That's one. Two, the video you see was after a 3-block foot chase in which the individual had been identified as matching the description of someone assaulting a federal officer about 1 hour prior to that video that you see. And the person was put in the van. You obviously saw the surrounding crowd a little bit there, which was a bit of a dangerous situation, which is why the individual was moved away. And from the time they detained him until the time they released him was under 10 minutes. And in that time, they also identified themselves. By the way, they identified themselves to the subject they picked up. They did not identify themselves to the crowd, and nor do they feel any obligation to do that, nor will you see that commence. We interact with the subjects we're dealing with, and that's it.
I got to let you go.
They determined that was not the person who did the assault and released him.
I do have to let you go, but there's a U.S. attorney, a federal U.S. attorney, launching an investigation into the practices out there, and now members of Congress are calling for the same, and inspectors general. You're nodding your head. Do you intend to cooperate with these investigations?
Yeah. With the Inspector General investigation, which is perfectly normal, we run our own investigation of every single use of force, every single one, by the Office of Professional Responsibility. So this is matter of course for us, and you bet we will. Of course we will.
Ken Cuccinelli, great to have you on. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.